What is up, everyone? Matt here. Welcome to another Last of Us recap on Down Once More. Uh, this week, we had our penultimate episode, When We Are in Need. So, I'm going to start off with a few general things. If you haven't watched one of my thoughts recaps here before, I will say spoilers for the game up to this point and spoilers for this episode, episode 8, and episodes that came before it, obviously. I will not spoil future things from the game or from the second game. And don't be dicks. Don't do that in the comments either. Let people experience things for themselves. Let people have fun. All right. Couple other things before I get into this episode. This episode, we had Troy Baker make his premiere. Troy Baker was the voice actor, and he did the mocap for Joel in the original games, and he played James in this episode, David's sidekick in his little cult. And in the game, David is voiced by Nolan North, who voices and plays the main character in the Uncharted series from Naughty Dog. And he plays Nathan Drake in those, and he had a cameo in the Uncharted movie as well. So, a couple little fun Easter eggs right off the bat there from the video games for you. A couple things I want to say about this episode. This episode actually was the first one that actually had changes from the game that I was kind of disappointed in and didn't love. That being said, it was still a fantastic episode and a fantastic adaptation of this section, this portion of the game. One of the things I'm going to say is that I know Neil and Craig have already addressed why there are less infected in the series versus the game, right? You have to have the infected there for a lot of gameplay elements and moments in the game that you don't in the series. The series is about the people, their stories, what they're going through. I've been fine with it up until the season. I've seen some people start griping. I saw a lot of things last week, which I was actually surprised by the not necessarily hate, but the pretty cold reception that I was seeing online from last week's episode. Maybe some of that's because I just replayed the games recently and played the DLC, and I actually like the story of the Left Behind DLC from the games, but a lot of people weren't feeling it as at this point in the series with the few episodes that we have that were taking that break from the main Joel and Ellie story and spending almost the entire episode in a flashback for Ellie. I didn't have a problem with it because we kind of get to see a lot of Ellie's motivations and what she's gone through and a lot of character development for her that we got in the first episode for Joel. So this was a decent part in the story for us to get that backstory, that character development on Ellie too, because she is every bit as important as Joel in this series, if not more so. So I had no problem with that. That's where it takes place in the game. But now back to what I was saying. Infected. This episode, I felt like really needed it. This portion of the game, when Ellie encounters David and James in the woods, and it plays out almost identically to how it plays out in the series. And David sends James to go get the medicine, and him and Ellie hole up. In the game, they're attacked by a herd of infected, and David and Ellie have to fight them off together. They have some more conversations and dialogue, and so it makes more sense in the game, in my opinion, why David then tells James to let Ellie go. I feel like it's more rewarding and it would make more sense in Ellie's head too. We get later in the episode, we get some more reasons why David's letting that happen. But in the game, in Ellie's head, I feel like she should be having more warning signs, warning bells go off than she does. And we haven't seen many infected in the game, which I get. It's not a show about the infected. It's not a zombie show. It's a survival show. It's the story of Joel and Ellie. It's a story about love. That's what The Last of Us is about. That's what Neil's said in many of these interviews. And so I get it. But at the same time, I feel like you got to give us a little more of the infected. We're getting this apocalyptic world that we're talking about how the cordyceps have ravaged everything, but we're not seeing a ton of that. So this was the one episode I really missed that, and I personally didn't like some of the changes that they did to David's character. Um, he was always in the game. It's hinted, it's alluded to that he's a cult leader, that it's their own cult, maybe some religious ties to it, because there is that big banner that we see in the opening scene of the episode, that says, when we are in need, he shall provide. That is in the game. We see it in the restaurant in the scene when Ellie is hiding from David and fighting him at the end of the episode. So we do see that in the game. So there's those hints to it, but it's much more overt, which I'm not too surprised. We knew that's what one of the things they've been focusing on in this series, right? Is giving more backstory and more depth to these characters with the creation of the Kathleen character and the Henry and Sam arc and her plot, and then just focusing more on David and his conversations with Ellie as well. And the episode opening with David reading a passage from the Bible to this community, which that's another thing. In the games, they talk about it being a community and the survivors hold up there. We don't see any women. We don't see any children. We just see the men that are very hunter focused, and they're violent and they're out there and they know what's going on. So, this was more like, what if Jackson didn't have their shit together vibes, more commune cult vibes. And they play it off. Nothing's too triggering or warning signs with David and what he's doing in the first part of it, right? It seems like he's trying to look out for people. We see the girl crying about her dad being dead and asking when they're going to bury him. And he says they have to wait till the spring. The ground's too hard, which I'm starting to feel different things about this series, right? I still absolutely love it. Don't get me wrong there. But I feel like I'm seeing why a lot of video game adaptations don't work. I'm not saying this one doesn't work. This one I think works well and is one of the best video games. But in it being a mostly faithful adaptation, I know what's coming. So certain things don't impact me the same way they would. I would say moments that impacted me more in this series than in the games are like the Bill and Frank thing, because we don't get to see that get played out fully in the games, right? The Henry and Sam thing, yeah, they took it to another level in the show, so that still kind of hits you, but I'm sitting there watching it and I know what's coming, so I don't let myself get as attached to those characters. In this, I was worried to start out that maybe they weren't going to go the cannibal route, that they were just going to have David be the crazy cult leader that's just very overbearing. But they didn't. They did still leave the cannibal angle in there. I was also concerned that they were going to cut out the Joel torturing the two guys for information, because I hinted at it in my recap for episode 6. They took the dialogue from that scene about "you better point to the same place he did on the map," those lines. They took that in episode 6 in the opening of that episode when they're talking to the two Native Americans in their cabin out in the middle of nowhere when they're trying to find Tommy. Right. So I thought they were maybe going to cut that scene out, and I was dreading that because I feel like that's a very defining moment for Joel's character as well. Because we've seen a little bit of his brutality and we've seen him talk about it. But the closest we've got to seeing it in action in the show is at the end of episode 1 when he beats the federal guards head in after he's testing Ellie and he catches them. So I think that was important to have in the series. And so I'm glad they did end up leaving that in, but I was worried for a hot minute there. Um, we find out again, if you haven't watched one of these before, I'm not gonna do a full recap. I find myself going down those holes and I want to just talk about everything about it, but no one wants to listen to me talk for an hour on here. So I'm gonna try to hit some of the other key points. I'd be curious to see if people who hadn't played the game and didn't know the cannibal angle, if they were kind of privy to it and leading on. They're talking about what meat is left. The main thing that kind of tripped my antenna to, oh yeah, they're definitely still cannibals, was when the lady asked the guy who comes in just carrying the bucket basically of raw meat what kind of meat it is, and he just says venison. Um, and so I was kind of triggered there. But man, knowing that they're cannibals, and knowing that that girl's dad had died, which I'm assuming you watched the episode, but that's the person that died at the university that Joel killed. Um, then David just sitting there watching her eat, and in your head, you're like, she could be eating her dad right now. Just raises the creepy factor of that scene and David's character as a whole to a whole other level. And that's where you another scene where you start seeing the kind of the creepy cult leader vibes and know that something's a little off with David is he walks into the restaurant, him and James are pulling the deer, and instead of everyone being excited and relieved, they're just in silence looking at him. He talks about, you may have heard a rumor. Yes, we found the girl that took Alec, I think was the name, that killed Alec and the guy. We are going to send a party out tomorrow to go after him. And the little girl that was crying at the beginning, that was Alec's daughter, um, says, you should kill them both. And David walks up and just slaps her with his gloves. And then I wrote it down. He's like, I know you think you don't have a father anymore, but the truth is, Hannah, you will always have a father, and you will show him respect when he's speaking. And they just sits down at the table and he's eating with her and her mom and just watching her eat, and just creep city vibes there, especially knowing, hey, she could be eating her dad right now. Because as David reveals to Ellie, not everyone knows that they've started eating people. That he felt like that's what they need to do to survive, and he couldn't let his people starve. The other big departure is David and Ellie having the conversation when she's imprisoned. In the game, it's a very quick, like 30-45 second scene that not much takes place. He hints at some of the things. Ellie sees him, he's chopping up a body when she wakes up and she sees the arm fall, and he's talking to her. They're talking back and forth about things, and there's some of the dialogue pulled into the show. Um, but mainly in the show, in my head, how it played to me is that they were giving David almost creepy pedophile vibes, right? He's talking to Ellie about she's a natural leader and she has that violence to her and bravery and everything, and that they could do things together and wanting to view her as a partner. Um, and it just gives off major creepy pedophile vibes, especially when he puts his hand on the cage to reach out to her and she puts her hand over it and he puts it on top. Or maybe, yeah, they do like almost like the on the top of the bat thing in baseball where you go back and forth and then she breaks his fingers. That's right from the game. And she says her name, says, tell him Ellie's the little girl that broke your fucking fingers. That dialogue straight out the game. In the show, he drops a cunt though. No cunt is dropped in the game. I think he just calls her a stupid little girl. But I don't know. The things he's saying here are so creepy, which he's like, I see a lot of myself in you. You have a violent heart. You're smart. And it was interesting when David's talking, he's almost saying that his beliefs that he found, it's not God. The other people, the sheep, need God and heaven and everything like that. He says he saw the truth in the cordyceps because they're fruitful and multiply. Line from the Bible: be fruitful and multiply. He said it feeds and protects its children. It secures its future when violence when it must, and that it loves. And that's what it seems like David's really in all of, and what kind of showed him the light. Because he had told Ellie earlier he was a teacher before he became a preacher after the apocalypse. And I don't know, the wanting Ellie to help lead, I didn't love those vibes. I There's some of the similar things and back and forth, but he it's kind of a little creepy and gives some creep vibes because he does the same thing, the hand on the cage trying to reach to Ellie, but he just tells her that she's special. And so it's not as overt as it is here. They've also been hammering home Ellie as a leader these last two episodes. In the last episode, when we had the flashbacks when she was in the Fedra training facility, and the captain tells her that she's a natural leader and she has those, oh, what am I trying to say? Those character traits isn't the right word, but you get the gist. And then with David telling Ellie that, I feel like it's interesting they're hammering those things for where the season's been going. I'm not sure Ellie being a leader is an important character arc, but they're definitely trying to establish something and set something up. I think that's clear. And in the after show, Neil Druckmann was saying that they didn't want it to be your typical where you feel like you know what's coming, that Joel recovered, he's going to break in and he's going to be the hero and save Ellie. That Ellie really had to save herself. They didn't want to give you that traditional hero story of what you're expecting. And I thought it was interesting. Neil Druckmann said that this sequence where you're playing as Ellie and everything, that's what inspired him and made him want to make the game. So I thought that was really interesting coming from him. Um, and Craig Mazin was saying at the end that the only person that can save Ellie is Ellie, and the how for her to do it to save herself is violence, and that it scars her in a way that forever changes her emotionally. And you see that when after she kills David in the steakhouse and escapes and goes out, and Joel comes up on her and she reacts, um, and just starts fighting him off, and he calls her baby girl, and he said that he's got her, which that's what he used to call Sarah. And that's when we're really seeing that their bond is even more cemented and they're just locked in. That father daughter dynamic is fully fledged right now after everything Ellie's been through and taking care of Joel and everything he's been through. Um, Going back to the fight with Ellie and David in the steakhouse, one of the other things that to me, with everything we've already seen and established with David, that kind of felt just creepy and unnecessary was after Ellie stabs him, he hits her, she's on the ground, and he just basically he straddles her and she's fighting back, and he's just saying like he thought she already knew that he liked the fight the most and not to be afraid, and there's no fear in love, and just these really creepy pedophile rapist vibes that I felt like was more overt than it needed to be. In the game, it's way more subtle. He's just when she's trying to get in the game, it's a machete, not a cleaver. He's just like, you think you know me, you have no idea what I'm capable of, and starts choking her, and then you get the machete and bash him in the head with it in the neck and just start going to town. In this, we have Ellie that gets the cleaver and just takes him out and just starts going to town and taking out everything she's been through with him, and the creepiness and the fear and everything and the anger, just taking it out and going to town on him. A lot similar to what Joel did to the Fedra guard in the end of episode 1, just to level 11, and for good reason. But I don't know. I didn't think that was super necessary. David, especially with people that have dealt with shit like that I don't know. I don't know, a little bit heavy handed. But ultimately, that pretty much does it for my thoughts on this episode. I don't have a ton of other things to add. It was a little bit all over the place. I apologize for that. It's AEW Revolution night, so I was watching that before The Last of Us. Then I paused it. Then I'm recording this. Then I'm gonna edit this and upload it. Then go back and finish watching that because we got some good matches still tonight. But and I'm running on little sleep. That's a pretty common thread on these. But if you watch to the end, Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you. Comment below your favorite episode of the series so far, and if you played the games too, what you thought of the changes and what you think of the infected. Are you okay that we're just focusing on the survival aspects and we're not seeing as many infected and cordyceps in the series, or are you really missing it and wishing they would throw more of that in there? So tune in. Next week's the final episode. I'm thinking after that, because I'm currently playing through the second game again. I played it once before, and no, hate me, I actually enjoyed playing the second game better than the first one. Um, I'm once I finish that, I think I'm gonna do final thoughts on season one of The Last of Us and 5 things that I either want to see in season two from the second game or things I want changed. So stay tuned and subscribe for that. I'll make sure there's heavy spoiler warnings on that because I don't want to ruin the experience for anyone. But subscribe to the podcast feed on here. It's not just Last of Us reviews. Try to do a little something for everyone. With my co-host Rayleigh on a regular podcast, we do some musical reviews. We do random life talk. We do this week we have coming out on Wednesday. We did a draft of songs from musicals and created our own kind of like playlist. So lots of fun stuff. Try to keep it interesting, keep a variety on there. So subscribe to the channel. We do new episodes every Wednesday. Last of Us reviews. We only have one left. That'll be next Sunday. As soon as the episode's done, I hop on here. I record my initial thoughts. It's part of why they're so scatterbrained. And then I edit it and get it up the same night. So, hope you enjoyed. Hope you keep tuning in. We got one more episode left, and I think we're going to be in for a doozy. So, as always, thanks for joining, watching. Don't forget to go down once more. Later.